Trump is coming after your Social Security. And if you're 25 years old, it's still a huge concern. And I'm not even talking about retirement. Check this out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Just, to start at the beginning, Trump was in Davos. I believe he's flying home right now. Or it might have been a little earlier, but he's on his way back. And in fact, I went back yesterday and looked at his tweets. It was amazing. It was like 100, I think it was 131 tweets. 140, Sean says? 140 tweets in the last 24 hours. A lot of them from Air Force One as he's coming home from Davos. He's bored. He's probably on his fifth can of Diet Coke. And he's just like, So, what all is Trump up to, first of all? Right now, as a result of something that Trump said in Davos, I would say, and I think there's a strong argument to say that Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are all officially in the crosshairs of the Trump administration. I mean, they always have been in the crosshairs of the Republican Party. The Republicans have fought Social Security since 1935 when it was passed. They have fought Medicare and Medicaid since the late 1960s. I think it was 67 when they were passed. But usually they say that they're actually trying to save it. Like when Ronald Reagan changed the rules around Social Security so that your Social Security benefits are now subject to federal income tax, and adjust and tied it to the cost of living adjustment that that includes every average people, that doesn't take into consideration the relatively unique concerns and expenses of older people over 65, which include medical expenses and transportation and things like that, housing, food, rather than new computers. So Reagan said, well, I'm strengthening Medicare and Social Security, and to some extent they did. I mean, they doubled the Social Security tax, but with that single exception, generally when Republicans tweak Social Security, what they're intending to do is bust it up. Because, there's this $2.7 trillion trust fund. Social Security has, $1 trillion a year cash flow, I believe, or something in that neighborhood. It's substantial. And the banks in New York are looking at this. I mean, Pete Peterson, became a billionaire by being a bankster in New York. He's passed away now, but his institute still survives, ranting about the debt and how, with this much debt, we can't afford Social Security. And that Social Security tax should be going right into the Treasury to pay down the debt, and Social Security should be handled by Citibank and Bank of America and Wells Fargo, don't you know? So anyhow, while hobnobbing with other billionaire oligarchs in Davos, Switzerland, billionaire oligarch Donald Trump said, and I quote, before the end of the year, sometime before the end of the year, he and his administration would be, quote, cutting entitlement programs. The billionaires, of course, thought that was just a fine thing. His speech was, broadly applauded. It's unlikely he's going to do this before November 3rd, Election Day. But whether he is or isn't reelected, if he's saying before the end of the year he's going to cut Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, then I think you can probably expect that November 4th he's going to propose it and the Republicans still control the Senate and they're going to go for it. It's not going to get through the House. Nancy Pelosi will stop that. But it highlights how important this election is coming up. If you're over 65, or for that matter, if you're over 50 and you're anticipating having Social Security as part of your retirement, or if you're any age and you anticipate Social Security as part of your retirement, this election is going to be a really, really critical one. And for that matter, if you're of any age, Social Security is still important. Say you're 25 years old. Most people don't realize if you're 25 years old and you get in a car accident and break your back so that you're paralyzed from the waist down, or break your neck so you're paralyzed from the neck down, as happened to my dear friend Michael Hutchison. And he spent the rest of his life, the next 15 years or so, he was on this program a number of times, in fact, talking about this, spent the rest of his life in an apartment in Santa Fe, New Mexico, with a full-time nurse taking care of him because he literally, could not move anything except the muscles of his head and his face. He could talk, that was it. And he could breathe. I mean, it hadn't completely shut him down, but Michael was able to stay alive because of Social Security disability. And Michael was in his 40s when this happened. So you have right now, regardless of your age, you could be 10 years old, 25, 50, whatever. It doesn't matter how old you are. You have an insurance policy right now that if you went out on the open market, if Social Security disability did not exist, and you went out in the open market and said, I want to buy catastrophic insurance. In the event I'm so disabled that I can no longer work, I want the insurance to pay my food, my living expenses, my health care expenses. I want it to pay all of that. Social Security and Medicare. It would cost a fortune. You'd be spending a couple $100, maybe $1,000 a month for insurance like that. You have that right now with Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. You actually have that, and people actually use it. In fact, about a third of all of Social Security's payments are for Social Security disability. Most of those people are not even 65. So, Trump's saying that he's going to cut this and he's going to turn it over to the banks and stuff like that. This should alarm all of us. This is the actual transcript. It was Joe Kernan from CNBC. He says, do I dare ask one last question? Trump says, go ahead. This is during the Q&A session after his speech. Kernan says, entitlements ever on your plate? Trump says, at some point they will be. We have tremendous growth. We're going to have tremendous growth. This year, it'll be toward the end of the year. The growth is going to be incredible, and at the right time, we will take a look at that. That's actually the easiest of all things, if you look. And Kernan says, if you're willing. And Trump says, big percentage. And Kernan says, to do some of the things you said you wouldn't do in the past, though, in terms of Medicare. Trump, well, we're going to look at it. Right. They're also moving ahead. The Trump administration is also moving ahead with plans to destroy Medicaid in red states. How do they do that? They turn it into block grants. Right now, if your state has, say, 100,000 people on Medicaid, and they're costing X, you get 100,000 times X in federal money, or a percentage. States get a certain, I believe it's around 90% of the funds from the federal government. So what this would do is say, okay, right now you're getting, let's say, $50 million a year for Medicaid for your state of Alabama or whatever. So we're just going to block grant it at that. And going forward, you're never going to get any more. As medical expenses continue to rise, if we hit a recession and people lose their jobs and have to go on Medicaid, they won't be able to. The Medicaid program will start basically cutting people off. Sorry, you've already spent, all the money we had allocated for you. We're not going to pay for your expensive chemotherapy.